welcome aboard.
Please welcome Axios co-founder Mike Allen to the stage.
Good morning. Good morning to our Axios News Shapers friends who are here in the room in Washington, D.C., and to our guests virtually around the world. I'm Mike Allen, a co-founder of Axios. Backstage, Hans Nichols asked me if I forgot my tie, so definitely Hans' humor there, which we'll get a little more of in a bit. On behalf of my co-founders, Jim Vandehei and Roy Schwartz, we wanted to thank all of you for supporting clinical, distinctive, illuminating journalism. Axios works hard every day to bring you what matters in a way that you can trust. So thank you for supporting it in person, virtually, and in all the manifestations of Axios. We're grateful to the Bank of America. For 8 years now, Bank of America, with this Axios News Shaper series, has made conversations with some of the world's most interesting and important people possible. And the Axios events team, which is just coming off a big doubleheader from the White House Correspondents' Weekend, spun this up. So we have an incredible lineup today. Thank you for supporting journalism that matters, making you smarter, faster, and now one of Washington's best known, most respected journalists, the maestro of Axios Hill leaders, Hans Nichols.
Please welcome to the stage Axios political reporter Hans Nichols.
With a tie, looking sharp.
Good morning, I'm Hans Nichols. I write Axios Hill Leaders, as Mike just mentioned. It should land in your inbox every night around 8 p.m. When it's late, that's my editor's fault, never my fault. We've got a great show coming up for you. Obviously, we have the Speaker of the House, some other great guests, great reporters. A quick thank you to Bank of America, who makes all of this possible. Mike mentioned that, long-term partners. Without further ado, you're not here to listen to me. You're here to see Speaker Mike Johnson. So, Speaker Mike Johnson, if I can invite you up to the stage. Thank you, Speaker. Thanks for doing this. Have a seat. Up late last night?
Yes, every night. Good job.
100 days?
Yes.
It's been a lot.
Yes, it has. It's like 1,000 days in some ways.
We probably have another 100 days before we go, before that one big, beautiful bill?
No. Sooner than that.
Okay, well then convince me otherwise. Because your timeline is Memorial Day to get out of the House. We've heard pretty clearly from the Senate that it's, July 4th. So does that mean the Senate's just going to accept everything you guys do?
Yes. Don't they always do that? No. It's a very aggressive timetable for a reason. We're trying to get this done. My original aspiration was by Memorial Day for the whole thing, but I've accepted reality. We'll get it out of the House by then, and then we'll send it to the Senate. I hope the Senate doesn't do a whole cloth rewrite. I hope they accept a lot of what we've done. We're working very closely with our Senate colleagues. Leader Thune and I talk all the time, meet at least once a week with our lieutenants. We have a big 6 meeting once a week, and that's the Treasury Secretary and Kevin Hassett at NEC, Senator Crapo, Leader Thune, myself, and Jason Smith, the Ways and Means Chair. And we meet with all of our top staffers. So there's a very close coordination. There's no secrets or surprises. And so the legislation that's sent over there, I think, will be well received. I hope they don't do much to modify it. And I think we can get it to the president's desk quickly.
But, Mr. Speaker, respectfully, hope isn't necessarily a strategy, right? They have serious senators over there who have serious concerns about the bill that you are drafting, and they are not going to rubber stamp that. So July 4th almost seems too optimistic for them.
I don't think so. I mean, that was the Treasury Secretary said July 4th this week in public statements, and we applauded that. But I really hope we do it sooner. And here's the reason why. This it has nothing to do with pride of authorship in the House or any of that. We just want to deliver for the American people, and so do all of our Senate Republican colleagues. The America First agenda, the vehicle to deliver that is reconciliation. And the sooner we do it, the better, Hans, because I think this will be a very important thing for stability. I think it'll send a very important signal to the bond markets, the stock market, to investors and job creators here and around the world. And it'll send a message to our allies and our enemies that America is serious. We have stabilized tax policy. Everyone will know what their tax rates are. That will be helpful for making decisions for companies. And also, of course, we're going to be deficit neutral or deficit reducing. We're trying to reduce the debt. And I think that's a really important message to send out there, that America is serious about our financial stability, and this bill is going to be, that's one of the many things that will be accomplished in it.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned sort of the certainty that Americans crave with their tax, sort of what they're going to pay, what they should be expected to pay. You'd agree that certainty is important.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So why is it not important for businesses that are facing a great deal of uncertainty with tariffs, wondering what the rate is going to be, wondering how their supply chains are going to stay unsnarled? Why do individuals get certainty and not business?
Well, we're trying to do it for both. And look, I think the president is as well. I speak with him all the time as well, sometimes multiple times a day. The tariff policy, you know, there's different viewpoints on this, but you can't argue with the fact that it's been very effective in shaking things up. By some measurements, we have more than 100 countries now coming forward to renegotiate trade agreements with America. That's good for Americans. It's good for consumers. It's good for our stability, because the disparity in our trade will be more equalized. And I think that's an important principle. What I think will happen is, in the days going forward, is there will be more concentration on just a small handful of countries, the ones that have been, frankly, the most abusive of our trade agreements and trade arrangements. And China, of course, is at the top of that list. So it's a delicate balance, but I think in the end, I think the strategy will make sense. And I think the economy will respond appropriately.
I'm going to get back to tariffs, but I want to jump back to the timeline, because I think you kind of maybe blew through that a little bit.
Not intentionally.
Is the real deadline the debt ceiling?
Sure, that's a big pressure point. And we don't know exactly when that X date will fall. The early projection is August or September, but I spoke with Secretary Bessent, just 2 days ago, and he said we're counting the tax receipts from April 15. We have a little bit more to do on that count, but we don't know exactly where it'll fall. I have had to work under the assumption, Hans, that it could be the earliest date, maybe early June. So we can't be caught flat-footed on this. And that is one of the other reasons why we push this so aggressively on the timeline.
Is there no other way to do debt ceiling other than put it in the reconciliation bill?
Well, I wish we could do it in a bipartisan fashion. That's the way it used to be done. But Chuck Schumer and the Democrats have shown no indication they have any interest in working with Republicans, even to save the U.S. economy. So we'll see.
But that means there's no plan B then. If reconciliation collapses and we're staring at debt ceiling, let's just do an optimistic scenario. It is after Labor Day. Let's use all our public holidays.
Yeah.
What's the plan B for the debt ceiling?
There's always a plan B. I mean, we always could go another route and try to talk some sense into the Democrats. I would hope that at least 7 of them would not want to crash the economy, which is what would happen. America doesn't default on our debts. We're not going to do that. And I think there are enough reasonable people on both sides of the aisle that would prevent that from happening.
Okay, I've counted three hopes. Excuse me. Yeah. Excuse me. Thank you very much for. We're trying to do our job here. We appreciate you sharing your views, but if I could just continue this, our conversation with the speaker, you would agree that you clawed your way to power.
Not at all. No.
You agree that you've fought back challenges.
Oh, yeah, certainly fought back challenges, I guess. I mean, we get up and there are challenges every day. But
would you agree that you're at the pinnacle of your power?
I don't know. I don't really think about it that way.
Well, let me ask it sort of entirely so you see where I'm going with this, the big wind-up. You've ceded a lot of authority to the president, a lot of constitutional authority to the president.
I don't agree with that.
Article 1 powers on tariffs. You've said you're going to give the president space on tariffs.
Yeah.
How much time are you going to give him?
Well, I mean, I don't know that there's a specific timeline. Look, I'm a constitutional law attorney. I'm a jealous guardian of Article 1 power and the separation of powers and constitutional balance. But whomever is the president of whatever party, they do have a broad degree of latitude, for example, to deal with unfair trade partners and trade practices. And that's what he's doing. I mean, what are we, about 3 weeks into the tariff policy of this new administration? I don't think it's appropriate for Congress to jump in the middle of that and try to legislate. I think the executive has a broad array of authority that's been recognized over the years. If it gets close to where the imbalance is there, then we would step in. But I think the first protocol, to be very frank, is I would call the president and talk with him about that and tell him our concerns. But right now, I think ultimately this policy is going to achieve the desired outcome, and it's going to be good for the country, and so we're applauding that.
Right now, the clock that you have set, at least on the rule that you attach to the reconciliation, is till the end of September, and that's going to prevent individual members from bringing something to the floor on tariffs. Do you extend that beyond September? I mean, I'm trying to understand, because you sort of just opened up there that if there was an issue with tariffs, you give them a call and then maybe take legislative action.
Yeah. Well, look, we work we're a consensus-building body. We have a small majority. I've got a 3-vote margin all the way through the remainder of this Congress, by all appearances. So, we make decisions as a body. It's just not a unilateral. I'm not a dictator. I don't get to determine all that. But if there's a consensus among the body, I'm the leader of the body, then I would do that. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think that this is beginning to settle out. I think the president put a 90-day pause, as you know, on much of it, and we'll see how that develops. But there seems to be a sense of calm that's settling over that, and I think, again, the desired outcome will be achieved.
Okay. Would you, on the spending front, Elon Musk and Doge, they've rescinded a lot of money. You're expecting a rescissions package here any day. Do you feel that encroaches upon Congress's power of the purse, the ability to spend? I mean, a lot of these spending decisions were made by you in the last Congress.
Well, my understanding is not the decisions. The rescissions package that is coming over would not be things that we authorize. It would be the previous administration and some of the things they spent unilaterally with executive action. But we don't know the details of that.
You voted on those packages.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what the specifics are that are coming over. We'll see. But I'm pretty sure I would have voted against most of what is going to be requested to be rescinded. But we'll see. I mean, the jury's still out. I will say this as a general notion. Republicans are fiscal conservatives. We're trying to restore fiscal sanity. And no matter who sent over a rescissions package, no matter what party the president was in, we would welcome that, and we would judiciously review what was sent and act upon it.
Does that judicious review with this rescissions package means you will absolutely do a rescissions package for 2025?
I'm anxiously awaiting a rescissions package. I don't know what the details are yet. They haven't revealed that to us, but sure, that's something that we would look. We have a $36 trillion federal debt. Okay, it's not sustainable, and everybody knows that. And if you interview leaders of the Pentagon or some of our top generals, Joint Chiefs of Staff, which we used to do in the House Armed Services Committee, anytime they're asked a question about the principal threat to America, what's the #1 national security threat? They don't say China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea. They say the national debt. We're going to spend more on interest on the debt than we spend on our entire defense budget. And so we have to reduce spending. We have to.
So we can expect Congress to pass the rescissions package for FY 2025?
That's my expectation, yeah.
Okay. And then would you go back in 26?
I'll go back as many times as the president will send us a rescissions package. We have to reduce spending. I mean, it shouldn't even be a partisan proposition. It's something every American has to support.
I started off talking about your power. 3 weeks ago, you were meeting with some conservative lawmakers, and you were very clear with them, this is right before the recess, that if you didn't achieve that $1.5 trillion in cuts, that they could vacate you. Was that a joke? Was that a statement of fact? Is that...
I mean, whether I say it or not, 9 people can bring a motion to vacate, and the speaker can be removed. So, I mean, it's a statement of fact.
Let me ask you, did you say it?
Yeah, I said it. What I was trying to emphasize is that I'm serious about that. There's a lack of trust in Washington. We've all been burned. We're all a little bit jaded. No one in particular is to blame. It's just the system. And we're trying to restore and rebuild trust. And your word is supposed to be your bond. I've never lied to any of my colleagues, and I was trying to emphasize the point. And I said, look, guys, I'm committing to this because we have to do it. It's just not about politics. It's about what's right for the country. And we are going to cut that amount of money because at a minimum, we need to do that to get back to physical. Look, I liken it, you've heard my analogy, I'm sure, Hans, but it's sort of like an aircraft carrier. You don't turn an aircraft carrier, a giant ship, on a dime. It takes miles of open ocean. And the U.S. economy is that. It took us decades to get into this situation, and it's going to take us a little while to get out. But we have to begin to turn the ship. And 1.5 trillion in savings is critically important first step.
And so the deal has always been on 1.5 savings for 1.5 additional and tax cut. Does that one-to-one match still hold? Is that part of your word being your bond?
Yeah, I mean, look, the House product, the resolution that we passed has what sort of like a ratchet system in it. In other words, those numbers have to rise or fall in tandem. So if we can't find a requisite number of savings, then that means there's less that we might be able to achieve in the overall package. And that's the general understanding among the House. It's what I committed to. And the Senate, I think, understands what we're trying to do.
You think they understand? You think?
Well, I know they understand, and I hope they agree. We'll see.
The $1 trillion in cuts that the president identified when those conversations, there are rumors that there's like a term sheet out there with specific line items in there. Is there a term sheet of $1 trillion in savings that the president and conservatives have already identified?
No, I wouldn't characterize it that way. Look, we call it the one big beautiful bill because it is so complicated and comprehensive. There's so much in this. So we have 11 different committees of jurisdiction working on it. 7 of those committees are doing markups this week, 4 committees next week, and then the third week, the Budget Committee will merge it all together into one bill. But I mean, so to speak, I guess there's sort of like a menu of options in each of those committees. We began to work on this more than a year ago. It was March of last year that we pulled the committee chairs together and they started putting those ideas together.
On the savings, I don't think there's a dispute to anyone that savings in Medicaid is crucial to you, but it's also strengthening the program in your views. Convince me that, say, $500 billion in cuts to Medicaid actually strengthens the program.
Well, I don't know that we'll have $500 billion in savings to Medicaid. We aspire to that. I can tell you that is actually, and ironically, the number of waste, fraud, and abuse over a 10-year period. It's $51 billion a year is an estimate. We think that's a low estimate of just fraud, waste, and abuse in Medicaid alone. Who could be for that? I mean, we have a responsibility to tighten this up. When you're talking about work requirements, that's over an 80% public approval rating that's single.
And that gets you about $109 billion. So
by some estimates, yes.
Yeah.
But you eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse, you bring in work requirements, and you tighten up the program, and you can find a lot of savings. And the whole point here, the whole idea, make sure illegal aliens are not receiving it, all the rest. The whole idea is that we're trying to preserve the program. Democrats were, frankly, lying about the intention of Republicans. It's so much so that we were able to get their ads and billboards taken down in swing districts by a cease and desist letter because it was based on nothing. They just made it up. You're going to see, I've been saying, just everybody, please reserve judgment till we get the product out. But you're going to see what the president said yesterday, accurately, that Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security are programs that are sacrosanct to the people. They depend upon these things, and our job is to shore them up and make sure that they're there, that we preserve the programs for the people who genuinely need and deserve it.
So where else are you going to go for savings? I mean, yesterday there was a lot of talk about FMAP and the per capita formula. Is that under discussion?
Look, we have a menu of options. It's about 3 pages long on each of these things. I'm not going to get in front of the Energy and Commerce Committee. They've been working on that, like I said, for over a year. But I think the final product will achieve the desired end, and that is for us to preserve and strengthen the programs and not cut a benefit for any single person who is intended to receive those. I mean, you're talking about the disabled, the elderly, young pregnant mothers.
Let's say you preserve it for the core beneficiaries that it was intended for. What's your ceiling on how much you can cut? 880 is the number. Don Bacon's saying nothing more than 500 billion. You just said 500 waste, fraud, and abuse. What's your number?
So 880 is the instruction number that's given to the Energy and Commerce Committee, but the reason E&C is the largest committee involved in this is because they have the most broad jurisdiction on matters related to reducing the budget. So we'll see what the final outcome is.
A big we'll see. We'll also see on retirements.
Yes.
34 retirements in 2018. Not a great year for Republicans. You've had some retirements. You may have a few more. How are retirements influencing the way you think, and do you think it'll be higher or lower than 34?
I'm not going to handicap it. I'm not sure. But we have a very talented House Republican Conference, lots of people who could do lots of things, and they want to serve the country. My preference, of course, is everybody stays and we get the job done together. But I don't begrudge anyone for seeking a higher office, governor or senator or what have you. So And there'll be some folks who retire. It's just inevitable in the cycle. But whatever challenges that presents, we'll deal with them. We did it effectively last cycle. We'll do it again. We set a quarterly fundraising record of all time in the first quarter. Our party's very motivated. I'm in the candidate recruitment phase right now, so we're working to recruit high-quality folks to run in the seats that, for example, there's 13 House Democrats, as we sit here this morning, sitting in districts that President Trump won, and we think that's really good territory for us, so we get highly qualified folks, we can flip those seats.
We're going to get a GDP figure here in, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. The economy goes south, environment's bad, and you happen to lose the House. How quickly do Democrats impeach Donald Trump?
Oh, I'm sure on day one. I mean, you know, they've already filed articles, and they're talking about it as recently as this week.
Is that part of your argument to voters, that Trump's impeachment is on the ballot in the midterm elections?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a reality, and it's madness. You know, we've already seen the movie. They tried it twice already, based on absolutely nothing, and they would do it again. I mean, Al Green filed impeachment articles like, I don't know, the 5th day of Congress. I mean, I think he did it before the president took his oath. So it shows you where they are. It's all raw politics, and it's terribly destructive for the country. I mean, it's a waste of time. We need the American people expect their Congress to work. They expect Congress to work with the president. They want big things done. And we had a really impressive first 100 days of the Trump administration. We're just getting started. We have a lot of work to do, and we don't have time for nonsense.
A year ago, you were up at Columbia University, the protests there. There's discussion among your colleagues about changing the tax status of the endowments of the Columbias, of the Harvards, of these elite institutions. Is that something you would actively support?
Yes. Look, my experience at Columbia was instructive. They not only allowed the anti-Semitism rise there, they enabled it. I mean, they genuinely did. I met with the president of Columbia at the time and said, bring order to the chaos. I had met with about 80 Jewish students off campus. You know why we met off campus? Because they were not allowed onto their own university campus. They're paying tuition, and they were instructed not to come to class because they might be physically assaulted. That is not what we should stand for.
What is taxing their endowments differently? What is that? Does that need to go through Ways and Means?
Yeah, you have to bring the universities to attention, and they have to do the right thing. I pleaded with the president of Columbia, y'all. I don't like using sticks. I mean, it's honey, not vinegar. I said, please do the right thing. Please bring order to the chaos. Please allow your Jewish students to come safely to class. The number one responsibility that any university president has is ensuring the safety and security of their campus. She refused to do it. She ultimately lost her job because of it. But I faced the angry crowd, and I just said, this is wrong. I mean, screaming, gnashing of teeth, all of it. And the anti-Semitism, the surge in it, was something that should concern every single American, and it was just plain wrong. And they should not, these universities have a very favorable tax, they get favoritism, frankly, for these endowments and some of the other things they do. And we have the power of the purse. And so Congress, I think, has a responsibility, a moral responsibility, to bring order to that chaos. And sometimes the purse strings are the only thing we have to get their attention.
Another purse strings question. There's a lot of conversation about this rescissions package, or even going forward about NPR and public broadcasting. Is the question of whether or not Congress defunds NPR a question of when or if?
Well, look, I don't know what the final outcome is going to be, but I can tell you there's a lot of thoughtful debate about it. I mean, it is a fair question for duly elected representatives of the people to ask the question: is this something that is a good use of taxpayer dollars? Is it fair? Is it objective? Is there a public value to it? And I mean, that's a thoughtful debate. And the leaders of NPR and PBS should make the case, and they will. I know you'll have an exceptional guest I met backstage up here shortly. And make the case. And I mean, that's what the free market is about. And we have to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, recognizing, again, the thing that governs most of the decisions we make is the concern about the financial structure of our house, so to speak, of our country. And we've got to spend wisely. And anyone who is going to use taxpayer funds should make their case for why that should be a continued thing.
I've got to wrap up, but I'm going to do a quick speed round.
Okay.
How many Signal chats are you on?
0.
Do you use Signal?
No.
Which member is the biggest texter?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I get about 400 a day, literally just from members. So a lot of them text. That's our main means of communication, and probably being monitored by the Russians for all I know.
How many reporters text you?
A bunch.
How many do you text back?
Almost none. But Hans, I'll respond to you.
What former speaker do you talk to the most, and what advice does he or she give you?
Newt Gingrich. He's very helpful. And I mean, I think he's probably the greatest living historian of the House in all of its ways, and he has lots of wisdom. And he has 100 ideas a day. I can implement about 1 or 2.
What's the craziest idea Newt's given you?
None of them are crazy. He's a wise counselor, and he does it as a benefit to the country. He didn't get anything out of that. He's just trying to help.
Something I think most people don't know about you is that you're a painter. Tell me the last time you painted, and do you paint water or oil colors?
Acrylic, because it's cheaper, and I haven't painted. I hadn't had time in probably the last 3 years. I'm from Louisiana, so our state bird's a pelican, and I painted this huge pelican. My wife wanted to buy this really expensive painting to go over the mantle, and I was too cheap to do it, so I did a knockoff copy of it. Turned out okay, so it's still hanging there.
Final question: who has more talent as a painter, you or former President Bush?
I'll give it to W. I got to visit his office. It was a great delight. I'd never met the man, but I became speaker, and I was in his part of the world in Dallas, and got invited to come to his office, sat down with him. I was so impressed with George W. Bush. He's just a very humble, just a very authentic guy, and he has lots of his paintings hanging in the office suite, and it was pretty neat to see.
Well, the next step is for you to auction off your paintings for fundraising. But with that, Mr. Speaker, we're out of the time. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here. I'll get your cell phone later. We can chat, a little light texting. Right. And if everyone could just stay tight for a quick message from Bank of America. Mr. Speaker, thanks again.
Thanks. Good to see you.
And now a message from our sponsor.
I played soccer in college, and we had an amazing season, and then just it all changed. I woke up one morning and had this terrible, terrible headache. I fell into a coma and woke up 5 days later, paralyzed from the waist down. I was lucky to receive incredible care that helped me recover. When I run, I think of people that are impacted by paralysis. Being able to help them feels like my responsibility. My marathon is for the Christopher and Dana Ree Foundation and improving the quality of life for those who are impacted by paralysis, just like I was.
What would you like the power to do? Bank of America.
Introducing Axios senior media reporter Sarah Fisher.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Our next guest is the longest-serving president and CEO of PBS, Paula Kerger. Please welcome her to the stage.
Thanks.
Paula, we've got a lot of breaking news, but I first want you to respond to Speaker Johnson. He said that in a free market, you should be able to make your case for why PBS deserves government funding. In 30 seconds, make your case.
Yeah, I actually agree. I mean, I think anyone that is asking for federal funding should be very clear on why it's important. And I think it's important to understand that the federal appropriation actually goes to our stations. Most of the money that comes in through the federal government was designed to ensure that we have public media stations in all parts of the country. And it's especially important for parts of the country where without that support, there wouldn't be public media stations. So for me, that's the strongest argument. I've spent a lot of time on the road. I've visited a lot of stations. In many communities, our public television, public radio stations are the last remaining locally owned and operated media companies.
And just remind the audience how many of those local stations fall under that PBS umbrella.
We have 330 stations across the country. So we are in every community.
When we think about what's been happening lately in terms of public funding for media, the Trump administration has tried to go after your funding as well as the funding of USAGM, which is the VOA parent. Yesterday was a very newsy day. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is the entity that funds PBS and NPR, sued the Trump administration for trying to fire 3 of its board directors. Within hours, a federal judge halted that through an injunction. I would like your reaction to that situation.
Yeah, so CPB should speak about their own board circumstance, but from what I understand, those 3 board members, you know, they're nominated by the president, they're approved by the Senate. This is not a government agency. This is a nonprofit organization that was set up to receive the federal appropriation and then distribute it out to the stations. Their job principally is to make sure that the stations are well run and that they are worthy recipients of funding. They do that for public television, public radio stations, and I think have done an excellent job. So it was a little surprising yesterday because they are an independent company, as we are. We're a separate 501c3 organization, so we'll obviously be following that very carefully.
If Donald Trump were to go after your board members, would you take the same action and sue?
Well, it would be hard to understand how that's possible because we're a nonprofit 501c3. We have no connection to the federal government whatsoever, but of course, if anyone went after our board in any way, we would defend it vigorously. We have an outstanding board that does an extraordinary job in making sure that we are meeting the needs of the communities that we serve. Half of our board are the presidents of stations from around the country, and then we have a wonderful group of leaders representing both parties, that represent a broad spectrum of interests and experience, and they do, I think, a really terrific job in making sure that we are meeting the needs of the public.
When I think about this effort to defund PBS, you are being coupled with NPR. Even though you are both public broadcasters, you're very different. PBS provides a lot of educational content for children, a lot of entertainment content, Downton Abbey. Does it hurt you to be bundled in with NPR as a part of this defunding conversation?
Well, we are separate organizations. I think people don't really understand the structure of public broadcasting at all. So we're not a network. I talked about the fact that there are 330 PBS stations. They're all independent. They're all locally owned, operated, governed. It's the same on the NPR side. So our organization is responsible for putting together the programming and to make sure that our stations have the infrastructure in order to serve their communities. That means broadcast capabilities and so forth. That's all the job of PBS. And so we're totally different organizations. Our news portion of the work we do, as you just said, is a little less than 10%. Obviously, everyone knows the NewsHour and Frontline and Washington Week and Firing Line with Margaret Hoover. Those are the principal shows that we do. But we do 8 hours of children's programming a day. And at a time when half of the kids in the country don't have access to high quality pre-K, our role, which goes all the way back to Sesame Street and Fred Rogers, has always been to make sure that those kids have exposure to the kinds of content and information that will help them begin to learn their letters and their numbers and actually be prepared to walk into school the first time they're in a formal classroom with those skills that will enable them to succeed in life. And that may be at the age of 2 or 3, but it may be at the age of 4 or 5. And I think that if we're really concerned about the future of our country, we have to invest in our children. And this is a very low-cost way of reaching across the country with content that we know, because we've been in this business for more than 50 years, makes a difference in kids' lives.
It's so helpful that you just outlined those differences, but just to follow up, does it hurt you that you're being coupled with NPR in this defunding conversation?
I don't really know. I just know that there's tremendous confusion. When I travel around the country, people always thank me for All Things Considered or Morning Edition. I actually know that they congratulate the NPR CEO on shows like All Creatures Great and Small and Downton Abbey, and so I just always smile. I will also say that some of our stations are radio and television as well, so we're together. We're together in terms of the public's perception, and we're both public media organizations.
When I think about support for NPR and PBS, it's only recently started to trickle in that Republicans are speaking up. There was an article this morning in The Hill in which Republican Dan Bacon, a Republican from Nebraska, said that you've been fair, PBS. Representative Mike Simpson of Idaho said, and quote, I love PBS. So the question to you is, do you think this is the start of a trend of more Republicans starting to come out and defend PBS, or do you think these are outliers?
Well, look, Sarah, if you look at our history over the years, we've always had bipartisan support. This is not the first time there's been a debate of whether there should be federal funding or no federal funding. These are also extraordinary times. So, I am hopeful because many of the people that you're talking about have great relationships with their local stations. They know what's at risk. They know that the federal funding enables them to have this community resource that's public broadcasting. And so I am hopeful, as I believe is happening all across the country, that people, not just people that work in public broadcasting, but constituents, people that rely on their local stations for content that makes a difference in their lives, if they let their elected officials know, then hopefully that will make a difference. Legislators are responsive to what the needs are within their communities. And I think that's what will make the difference of whether we're successful here or not.
Yes, and just to correct myself, he said, I like PBS. Don't want to misquote the representative. When it comes to what's been happening with PBS and NPR, there is also an investigation into both of you, both public broadcasters, by the Federal Communications Commission. They are probing whether or not your use of corporate sponsorships is ethical. What is your response to that investigation?
So, look, we're cooperating with the investigation. I would say that I stand behind the sponsorship work that we've done. We've worked closely with the FCC over the years as we have developed the sponsorship messages that appear on our air. So we have a long record of that work. And I hope that we can turn the page on this because obviously our funding comes from 15% of the funding in total to public broadcasting comes from the federal government. Now that's an aggregate number, and I've just explained most of that money goes to stations. For some stations, it's 7, 8, 9% of the budget. I was just in Texas last week talking to a small station. It's almost 50% of their budget. They have 12 employees. They will go off the air. So the federal appropriation is an important piece, as is the biggest portion of funding that comes into public broadcasting, which is viewers like you. And then there is corporate support. So we really work very hard in what was envisioned as a public-private partnership. I believe when you look at back over the years, we've been one of the most successful public-private partnerships. This is what LBJ envisioned when he signed the Public Broadcasting Act, is that where stations have the wherewithal to raise money, they will. And where there is need for more support, that is what comes from the federal government, and together we've been able to make that work. So the corporate piece is an important piece. And so we're fighting on the one side to make sure that we hold on to the federal appropriation for those stations that really need it. And on the other side, we're working really hard to make sure that we have the ability to also match that money with other resources so that we can create a fulsome service that meets the needs of people across the country.
Is this defunding campaign hurting you reputationally, which hinders your ability to get some of that reader revenue?
From individuals?
Some of that, individual revenue, viewership revenue.
No, I think what it is doing is it is making people pay attention to whether this is something that's important. And so I know that people are reaching out on the Hill. I encourage if people have opinions about this, it's very easy. You can call or text or reach out to your member of Congress and just let them know how you feel. I think that's important. I also think that for our stations, it's also a reminder that we only exist because of the support of communities across the country. So I don't know that it's actually hurt our reputation. What I think it has done is it has helped people focus on the value of what they receive.
Going back to the corporate sponsorship question, the White House this year said that they would take corporate sponsors for their Easter egg roll. Do you think that the administration is being hypocritical by taking corporate sponsors for their events, but probing what you're doing with yours?
I don't know. What I will say is, again, as we work with the FCC, I hope that we can quickly get on the other side of this, because it is our relationship with the corporate community, our relationship with foundations and individuals is tremendously important. And as I said, all of these pieces are really required for us to be able to serve.
We are hearing, and it's been reported, that the president is going to send an order to Congress urging the defunding of NPR and PBS. We have not yet heard news that that has happened quite yet this week, although we're expecting it. What are you hearing of that action heading to the Hill?
I'm mostly following people like you to try to understand what's happening. I was listening very closely to Speaker Johnson before when he was talking about the rescission package. So I think there have been so many rumors over the last weeks that a rescission package is imminent, and we haven't seen it yet. So obviously we're very anxious to see what they're talking about. The rescission package that is on the table, we believe may be looking at funding that has already been appropriated by Congress for the next 2 years. And so that's what they're talking about removing. These are funds that we and our stations were anticipating would be coming in. So it is a serious circumstance that, you know, as we make our case every year, we're always talking to appropriators about the importance of the work, but these are funds that we were already counting on because it's already appropriated. So we're anxious to see what they're talking about, and we will be responding very quickly.
When I hear you say these are funds that have already been appropriated, I think about what's been going on with USAGM and the VOA and Radio Free Europe and Radio Free Asia, et cetera. Their funds were already congressionally appropriated, and when there was efforts to defund them, the courts stepped in, there were lawsuits, and overwhelmingly judges have sided with these international broadcasters. What is your reaction to the way that the courts have been handling public media?
Well, I mean, I think that it's... you know, I've been in this job for almost 20 years, and I've not thought about having to go to the courts for any kind of resolution. My hope is that we can work this through the usual process, and that's what we'll focus on, but we'll do whatever it takes to ensure that we have the funding for public media.
When we think about PBS, so much of it isn't news programming. You said news programming, 10%, less than 10%?
Yes, a little less than 10%.
The rest of it is kids' content. It is entertainment content. Walk the audience through things that PBS produces and airs that they might not even be aware of.
Well, I mean, the thing that's wonderful about public broadcasting is that we are a variety service. We take very seriously our role to serve all of America. And so, yeah, we do a little bit of news. We do a lot of kids programming. As I think I mentioned before, some of our stations are airing up to 8 hours a day, and we actually feed through our stations free, and because remember, we're free to everyone. I mean, that's the power, and so we think carefully of what would be important for the public. And so in addition to the 8 hours that many stations air on their regular channel, a lot of stations run 24-hour children's programming also on a free multicast channel. So that's an important piece. But the most popular programs we do are the documentaries from Ken Burns. We have a significant documentary series coming up in November on the American Revolution. And when we started working on this project literally 10 years ago, I thought this would be an important moment right before the 2026 and the 250th anniversary. It feels even more important now as we look at trying to understand where we go as a country, to understand how it began. It was complicated, it was messy at the beginning, but to help people really understand what this idea of democracy, which started a global movement that started here, what did that mean, what was envisioned, I think will be part of a grounding as we try to figure out and where do we go now. So there's always the work of Ken Burns, there's the work of Skip Gates, the Finding Your Roots series, the documentaries that he produces, the dramas that people absolutely love. I mean, this has been part of our legacy. I mean, I think people realize that cooking shows started on PBS. That's Julia Child. Financial news started on PBS with Wall Street Week. The first hour broadcast of news, network news, was the News Hour. I mean, so there's so many. We even were the founders of reality programming. This is not necessarily something I'm proud to brag about, but the Loud Family was the beginning of that kind of cinema verite, look behind the scenes at life within one American family. So much of what we've done, Antiques Roadshow, which people love, there's all these spin-offs that now have appeared on cable. So, you know, we're constantly thinking about new ideas and new genres and again, serving the public.
So when we think about this conversation today, a lot of news. I asked if you agreed with Speaker Johnson or your reaction to him, and you said you did, that, you know, in a free market, people should be making the case for why they should be getting
Yes.
government funding. 330 local PBS stations. You reiterated, the Committee for Public Broadcast, Corporation for Public Broadcast is not a government agency, nor is PBS. I asked if Donald Trump or the administration were to come after you, and what you would do in that situation. You said you would rigorously defend PBS. You said people don't understand a lot of the times the public broadcast structure, and I asked about that as it pertained to whether or not being coupled with NPR weighs you down. You said there's just a lot of confusion. You get credit oftentimes for All Things Considered, even though that's an NPR program. News, less than 10% of the PBS programming, even though some of your most popular programs like NewsHour and Frontline are news. 8 hours of children's programming a day. When we think about the support that you're getting from Republicans, you seem very hopeful that they're going to understand you said, in quote, they know what's at risk of what would be pulled from their communities. And then sort of lastly, when we think about the overall structure of what's been created over 50 years of PBS, I think it's a good reminder to the audience that PBS started out with things like Julia Child's cooking show. I gotta say, I would not consider PBS the, matriarch of reality TV, but if you want to own that, Paula Kerger, we will allow you to. Thank you so much for joining us today,
Thank you,
and thank you
Sarah.
to everyone in the audience.
Thank you. It's great, thanks.
Please welcome to the stage Axios congressional reporter Stephen Newcomb.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Stephen Newcomb. I am a co-author of Axios Hill Leaders. It should hit your inbox around 8 p.m. each night. If it's ever late, it is Hans's fault, not my editor's. Thank you all for being with us this morning. For our final interview this morning, I'm excited to welcome our next guest to the stage, Senator from the great state of Maryland, Chris Van Hollen. Hey, buddy. Thank you, Senator. See you. All right. Senator, thanks for being with us. Any interesting trips recently?
No, in
all seriousness,
I'm glad I made it back, but happy to.
I think your return has been well documented, but it's been about a week. Do you have any updates on the situation surrounding Mr. Kilmore Abrego Garcia, and what do we know is the latest with what's going on there?
Well, so the only update with respect to his family, I met with his wife Jennifer and his mom and his brother after I got back, and they still are not able to reach him or communicate with him in any way. Total communications blackout. I did write to President Trump yesterday because it's clear that the Trump administration's continuing to violate the Constitution and Abrego Garcia's due process rights. And as I pointed out repeatedly, this is about more than one man. I'm not vouching for him, I'm vouching for his rights, because if you take away and trample on his rights, you threaten them for everybody. And I pointed out in this letter to the president that they are refusing to comply with the 9-0. We don't get many 9-0 Supreme Court rulings to facilitate his return. And I specifically cited the fact that when I met with the Vice President of El Salvador, the Vice President of El Salvador said the ball was in America's court and that the only reason they're keeping him is because the United States is paying them to keep him. It was very clear. So there are no excuses for the Trump administration to continue to violate his due process rights.
You've said that you're in a constitutional crisis when it comes to this issue. I think a dynamic that's playing out on Capitol Hill, though, for Democrats is you say you're in a constitutional crisis, but there are still things on Capitol Hill I think that Democrats see as a need to work together on a bipartisan basis, whether it's government funding, a whole host of issues. The grassroots wants to see Democrats do more, stand in the way of more. Are there areas that you think it's still important, given the fact that you're in a constitutional crisis, the president is blatantly disregarding the will of the Supreme Court, that Democrats do need to work together with Republicans on Capitol Hill on?
Well, I do think we're in a constitutional crisis, and I think this case of Abrego Garcia highlights it, right? Because you have, again, the 9-0 decision. And we have now 200 lawsuits filed in federal courts around the country as a result of this law-breaking president. Of course, we'll continue to do what we can for our states and the country. I mean, I'll give you one example from the last Trump administration. The first budget that they submitted, zero out funding for Maryland's Chesapeake Bay program. You're from the Eastern Shore originally. They zeroed out funding for EPA's Chesapeake Bay program. That was $73 million a year. We worked on a bipartisan basis in Congress. At the end of the four years of the first administration, we'd actually increased funding for EPA's Chesapeake Bay program to $85 million plus. So yes, there are ways that we can work on a bipartisan basis in the Senate, but that will require, Stephen, that will require that they stand up to this president. And so far, this time around, we haven't really seen that. We've seen Republicans in the Senate stand by while Donald Trump literally shreds Article 1 of the Constitution, illegally impounds funds and other things. So we will see.
Yeah. The popularity of the party on Capitol Hill is probably at the lowest point that it's been in your congressional career. You've been in the House before the Senate. There's a lot of theories going on around why Democrats lost in 24. 24 has been well litigated, but it seems like the popularity has continued to decline as the first 4 months of this Congress have gone on. What's your diagnosis for why the party is viewed so unpopularly right now?
So you're right. We have only up to go. That's good news. And so, look, I think there are two things. One is I think Americans, regardless of political party, want people who are going to fight for the things they believe in. I think they are tired of people who have sort of their fingers in the wind to try to figure out where to go. I think we need to fight this lawless president on all fronts, but I also think we need to provide an alternative vision for the country. And I think there's an opportunity to do that, especially as we come upon the Republican plan to provide a big tax cut for very rich and wealthy people and big corporations at the expense of everybody else in America. So my view is, in addition to fighting that, we should have some alternative, and I'm working right now to present that kind of alternative.
The next step to going upward is the 2026 midterms. You've run both the campaign chair of House Democrats and Senate Democrats as well. The map in 2026, I think you talked to Democrats in D.C., there's no illusion that it's an easy path to the majority. I know that Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said earlier this month that he was confident he would be majority leader next year. But how do you see the map, just as somebody who's been in that situation, and what is your expectation going forward in 2026?
Sure. Well, look, let's start with the House. Obviously, the margins are much closer there. There are 4 seats right now. We have a little steeper climb in the Senate. But midterms, as you know, are usually referendum on the party in power. And right now, Republicans, as we well know, are in power everywhere in Washington, House, Senate, White House. You talked about the Democrats' low standing. The president's standing has absolutely plummeted. It's been a disastrous 100 days, and the American people are onto it. This is a great betrayal. He said he was going to he's going to look out for working people and the people who have been left behind. He's doing everything but that. I just saw the bad news for the country, that our economy is contracting. Consumer confidence is plummeting. And the thing about this, Stephen, is this is a self-inflicted wound. I mean, this is all because of the chaos of the tariff policy, up and down. And so I think when it comes to the midterms, if this is a referendum, as it usually is, on the party in power, that obviously provides opportunities for the Democrats.
Yeah, for sure. I think that there's something that happened in PG County. The commanders are coming, looks like they're likely coming to D.C. Governor Moore has talked about the need to build up the area around the stadium in PG County, whether the stadium stays or there's redevelopment. Just your thoughts on the news that it looks like the commanders are coming back to D.C. and what should happen with that piece of land in PG County?
Sure. So look, as the governor said, Maryland was disappointed that the commanders chose to move to the RFK, but we've always said that our priority is to make sure that the community where the current stadium site is, has their interests put first. And so months ago, the governor and I and others worked with the team to get a memorandum of understanding as to what would happen with that site in the event that they chose to go back to RFK. And it spells out very clear commitments about investing in the community. We want to make that a very vibrant community. Right now with the stadium, the stadium's only used, infrequently, as you know. I mean, even during the season, it's only not even once a week. So there are other things that can be done to invest in that community, and we're mostly going to be focused on bringing the team together with the community to determine what the community believes is in their best interest.
You are a big foreign policy guy. You've been involved in the discourse in the Israel-Palestine conflict. What has your communication level been with the Trump administration on the facts on the ground, how it stands right now? And do you think, are you concerned about the level of attention that the administration is paying, particularly to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza?
Oh, I am very worried about their total lack of attention to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. We're now almost 60 days into a total humanitarian blockade, getting worse by the day, and I've not heard anything from the administration. Look, my view has always been that we need to assure Israel's security. Absolutely. There can be no more October 7ths. But we also need to create a path for security and self-determination for Palestinians so that both peoples have security and their human rights are respected. This administration is doing nothing in that regard. In fact, many of us saw in horror as President Trump stood next to Prime Minister Netanyahu and actually proposed pushing 2 million Palestinian civilians out of Gaza, which is ethnic cleansing by any other name. And the fact that the President of the United States could even discuss that, to me, just shows the depths to which this administration's gone. So, look, President Trump said he was going to be the big peacemaker. He's going to end the war in Ukraine on day one. He's thrown the Ukrainian people under the bus, and, Putin is cheering him on. And in the case of Gaza, the war continues. So if you look at our foreign policy, this is not America first. This is America in retreat.
We have just a few minutes left, a couple quick ones. There is a big leadership battle for Senate Democrats with Minority Whip Dick Durbin stepping away after the next term. Brian Schatz, who is the Chief Deputy Whip, has jumped into that race. Do you plan to weigh in? Do you support his candidacy? Do you think that this is a conversation that should be happening so soon? It's not an election that will be decided until after the midterms.
So first, let me just say a word about Dick Durbin, because he has been a great and principled leader, not just for the people of Illinois, but for the country. And it's been a great honor to work with Dick Durbin on many, many issues. My view is the conversation should start now, and there are ongoing conversations, but they should finish after the election.
A couple more quick ones. The Orioles, how do we feel? How do we fix them? Things aren't going well. What are we doing here?
So look, the good news is we beat the Yankees in the first game of the series. Yes, we took a drubbing last night.
15-3 last night.
Well, but now tonight we have an opportunity to win the series. So go O's.
You talked about presenting an alternative to the American people. You can't just be anti-Trump, anti-MAGA. You have to present an alternative. The theory of the case from Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is that you can whittle down his popularity so far that the elections will be a referendum against him, and you will be able to return to power. I think that you've seen you guys hammer Social Security, the spending cuts. Is that enough, or does there need to be another proactive leg of the Democratic resistance?
So look, of course we need to sort of focus on the damage the Trump administration is doing to the country and the American people. Whether it's firing people at the Social Security Administration, whether it's freezing important investments in communities all over the country, whether it's letting Elon Musk take a chainsaw to the federal government, not anything to do with government efficiency, but really to rig the government for people like Elon Musk. So we need to, again, shine a spotlight on everything that's happening, and we can see the American people understand because we see, Donald Trump's polling way down. That said, I do believe that we should have an alternative, and I think, again, as I said, there's an opportunity to do this as part of the debate over the Republican plan to provide big tax cuts for the wealthy and pay for it by cutting, Medicaid. We just saw one of the Republican House members say, it's got to be a minimum of, $500 billion in cuts to Medicaid. My view is we should have a plan that does focus on working people and provides working people with some real tax relief because they are being squeezed from all sides.
Senator Van Hollen, that's all the time we have this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. To our audience, thanks again for joining. Thanks again to Bank of America for making all of these conversations possible. Be sure to subscribe to all of our newsletters at axios.com/newsletters. Thanks again for joining. Thanks again, Senator.
Thank you.